Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of a knock on the door. Within minutes, your life changes forever. Your husband is taken away, accused of being an enemy of the people. But the punishment does not stop with him. Soon, you are arrested too, not for something you did, but simply because of who you married. You are sent far away to a prison camp, surrounded by barbed wire and guards, where thousands of women share the same fate. This was the harsh reality for many wives who were imprisoned in camps, such as the Akmola camp for wives of traitors to the motherland, a place that became a symbol of suffering within the larger Gulag system during the time of the Great Purge. Historical context. During the period of intense political repression in the Soviet Union, particularly in the 1930s, the government carried out widespread purges against people suspected of opposing the state. This period is often connected with the Great Purge, when arrests, trials, and deportations became common across the country. The term enemy of the people was widely used by authorities to describe individuals accused of disloyalty, sabotage, or counter-revolutionary activity. In many cases, the accusations were vague, exaggerated, or entirely false. But once someone received this label, the consequences were severe. People could be imprisoned, sent to forced labor camps, or executed, often after brief or secret trials. The system of camps where many prisoners were sent was known as the Gulag, a vast network of labor camps spread across remote regions of the Soviet Union. What made this repression especially devastating was that punishment often extended beyond the accused individuals. Authorities frequently targeted family members, believing that relatives might also be disloyal or that punishing families would prevent resistance. Wives of accused men were particularly vulnerable. Even without evidence of wrongdoing, they could be arrested and transported to special camps designed specifically for them. One of the most well-known places associated with this policy was the Akmola camp for wives of traitors to the motherland in Kazakhstan. Many women who were teachers, doctors, artists, or ordinary workers suddenly found themselves imprisoned because of their marital connection. Their lives changed overnight, moving from normal daily routines to a harsh reality of surveillance, forced labor, and isolation. The broader political climate of fear and suspicion allowed such policies to exist, as people were afraid to question authority or defend those who had already been labeled as enemies. During the years of political repression in the Soviet Union, punishment often extended beyond the individual who was accused of wrongdoing. Once a person was labeled an enemy of the people, the consequences could reach their entire family. Authorities believed that relatives might share the same alleged disloyalty, or that punishing families would discourage others from opposing the state. Because of this belief, wives, children, and sometimes even parents of the accused were treated with suspicion. Wives were especially vulnerable because they were considered the closest companions of the accused men. Many women were arrested suddenly, often without any evidence that they had committed a crime themselves. Their only connection to the accusation was their marriage. These arrests were frequently carried out by the NKVD, the Soviet secret police responsible for enforcing state security policies at the time. Officers could arrive at homes late at night, inform the women that their husbands had been arrested for political crimes, and then detain the wives as well. The process rarely included a fair investigation or a proper trial. Many women were simply given administrative sentences that sent them to prison or labor camps for several years. Children were sometimes taken away and placed in state orphanages, which created deep emotional trauma for families that had already been torn apart. The policy of punishing family members was formalized through orders that targeted the relatives of those accused of treason. As a result, thousands of women were transported to remote camps, including places like the Akmola camp for wives of traitors to the motherland. These women came from many backgrounds: teachers, nurses, writers, factory workers, but they shared the same fate of being imprisoned not because of their own actions, but because of their relationship to someone who had been accused by the state. The experience created a climate of fear throughout society, as people understood that political accusations could destroy not only one life, but the lives of entire families. During the years of political repression in the Soviet Union, special prison camps were created specifically for women whose husbands had been accused of treason against the state. One of the most well-known of these places was the Akmola camp for wives of traitors to the motherland, often known by its abbreviation ALŽIR. This camp was located in a remote region of Kazakhstan and was part of the larger network of forced labor camps called the Gulag. Thousands of women from different parts of the Soviet Union were transported there after their husbands had been arrested and labeled as political criminals. Many of these women had never been involved in politics and had lived ordinary lives as teachers, doctors, artists, engineers, or factory workers. Their imprisonment was based mainly on their relationship to men who had been accused by the authorities. The camp was established in the late 1930s during the height of political repression associated with the Great Purge. Women were brought to the camp by long train journeys in overcrowded wagons, often traveling for days or even weeks before arriving. When they reached the camp, they found themselves surrounded by barbed wire fences, guard towers, and armed guards. The environment was harsh and isolated, making escape nearly impossible. Prisoners were required to perform heavy labor such as construction work, agricultural tasks, or other physically demanding activities needed to maintain the camp's operations. Many of the women imprisoned there had been separated from their children and families before arriving. Some had no information about the fate of their husbands, while others later learned that their spouses had already been executed. Despite these conditions, prisoners formed small communities of support among themselves, sharing food, helping each other survive the cold winters, and offering emotional support during moments of despair. Life in the camp was shaped by strict discipline, constant surveillance, and the struggle to endure the difficult environment while maintaining a sense of dignity and solidarity among fellow prisoners. Life inside the camps was defined by extremely harsh and demanding conditions that affected every aspect of daily survival. Women who were sent to these camps, including places like the Akmola camp for wives of traitors to the motherland, were forced to adapt quickly to an environment that was physically exhausting and emotionally draining. These camps were part of the larger system known as the Gulag, a network of labor camps spread across remote and often severe regions of the Soviet Union. The locations were intentionally isolated, making it difficult for prisoners to maintain contact with the outside world and almost impossible to escape. In Kazakhstan and similar regions, winters were extremely cold and windy, while summers could be hot and dry, creating difficult living conditions throughout the year. Food was limited and often lacked proper nutrition. Prisoners typically received small rations of bread, soup, or porridge, which were rarely enough for women who were expected to perform heavy physical labor. Many prisoners experienced constant hunger, and malnutrition weakened their bodies over time. At the same time, the work assigned to them could be very demanding. Women were required to take part in agricultural work, construction projects, or other labor necessary for maintaining the camp's operations. Long working hours combined with inadequate clothing made the cold weather especially dangerous, as frostbite and illness were common during winter months. Housing conditions were also difficult. Prisoners usually lived in crowded wooden barracks with limited heating and poor sanitation. Illnesses spread easily in such environments, and medical care was often minimal or unavailable. Fatigue, disease, and physical strain became normal parts of everyday life. Despite these challenges, many women attempted to support each other by sharing food, helping the sick, and forming friendships that helped them cope with the difficult circumstances surrounding them in the camp system associated with the Great Purge. The suffering experienced by the wives of those labeled as enemy of the people was not limited to physical hardship. In many cases, the emotional and psychological impact of their imprisonment was just as severe as the difficult living conditions. When these women were arrested and sent to camps within the Gulag system, their lives were suddenly separated from everything that had once given them stability and identity. Many of them were taken away from their homes without warning, leaving behind children, relatives, and careers. The uncertainty surrounding the fate of their husbands created deep emotional distress, as many women did not know whether their spouses were still alive, imprisoned elsewhere, or already executed. Separation from children was one of the most painful aspects of their experience. In numerous cases, children were removed from their mothers and placed in state orphanages or with distant relatives. Mothers in the camps often had little or no information about where their children were living or how they were being treated. This uncertainty caused constant anxiety and grief, which remained with many women throughout their imprisonment. The emotional burden was made even heavier by the stigma attached to their situation. Being connected to someone accused of treason meant that society often viewed them with suspicion or fear. Even after release, Former prisoners sometimes faced difficulties finding work or rebuilding their social lives because people were afraid of associating with them. Inside the camps, isolation and humiliation were also common experiences. Prisoners lived under strict supervision and were constantly reminded that they had been labeled as relatives of traitors. Despite this environment, many women tried to maintain their sense of dignity and humanity. They formed supportive friendships, shared stories of their families, and helped each other endure the long years of confinement in places such as the Akmola camp for wives of traitors to the motherland, where emotional resilience became an essential part of survival. The experiences of the wives of those labeled as enemy of the people have become an important part of historical memory and reflection in the modern world. For many years, the suffering that occurred within the Gulag system was not openly discussed. Official narratives often avoided acknowledging the scale of repression that had taken place during events such as the Great Purge. However, as historical research expanded and archives gradually opened, historians, writers, and survivors began to share testimonies and documents that revealed what life had been like for those who were imprisoned. Personal memoirs, letters, and interviews helped the public understand the experiences of women who had been punished, not for their own actions, but because of their relationships with accused individuals. Memorial sites and museums have also played an important role in preserving these stories. One significant example is the memorial complex at the former site of the Akmola camp for wives of traitors to the motherland, which today stands as a reminder of the thousands of women who were imprisoned there. Such places allow visitors to learn about the past, see historical records, and reflect on the consequences of political repression. Educational programs, documentaries, and academic studies continue to explore the experiences of these women, ensuring that their stories remain part of historical understanding. Remembering these events is important because it highlights the dangers of collective punishment and the misuse of state power. When governments treat suspicion as proof and punish people without fair trials, entire communities can suffer. The history of these camps encourages societies to value justice, transparency, and human rights, and to recognize the importance of protecting individuals and families from being unfairly targeted during times of political fear and conflict.